Hey everyone, Otteray here, and we're looking at another plus 12, this time, the Theater of Pain. I'll be doing a pretty standard pull route here, simply interrupting and grouping these, and then pulling them into the boss when we're ready. As you can see, we have double Ret Paladin here, which is good for the burst. Making sure to get interrupts on the mob here, or allowing me to reflect. I'll slowly begin to back these mobs up into the first boss. Then we'll begin making sure we get the interrupts on Sathel, but we'll actually be mainly focusing Paceran here. He's the real trouble mob as far as avoidables, putting down that decaying breath, and then also making us do the dance. Mighty smashes some group damage, and then of course you're wanting to interrupt or reflect the necrotic bolts. I try and tank these on the edges of the pentagon symbol here and just simply kite clockwise as the dance goes. As you'll see here, relying on the ranged interrupt from the shaman to make sure we get that necrotic bolt to bring Sathel back in, and then keeping him stacked as we move around. Get a nice reflect on that one, keeping them nice and grouped. More interrupts, more raid damage. As long as you have a consistent kite path, this boss is pretty straightforward, and DPS can get a lot of uptime if they're careful, right? And that's the main goal here, slow and steady. I'm not trying to be too jerky with the boss movements, and I'm trying to keep them as stacked as possible, although Sathiel, whenever he's casting, or Paceran, whenever he's doing the dance or decay, obviously they'll get out of the stack a bit, but otherwise, pretty straightforward boss fight with the triple cleave. Now, good thing about taking down Paceran first is that once he's down, you don't have to move the mobs anymore. You can just stand still for the rest of the fight. That's that, and then we will begin the gauntlets. Now, I will identify each wing by the flag color because it's pretty easy to identify immediately, but essentially we'll go red, light green, then dark green, and so red being the gladiator wing, we'll head there first. And there's a reason why we go in that order, but I'll explain that in a bit as we get through each wing. So, as you can see, red banners on the outside. We immediately head to that. I like to kill the Arbalest here before pulling the first boss, because these Arbalest mobs can be unpredictable and they're not easy to stack up, so it's a lot easier to just have the cleave mob stack up on here while he moves around. I try and do this with a lot of the range mobs that don't like to play nice. I prefer to just isolate them, take them down, and then go into the boss. This boss throwing down the swords that move around, and so we simply start going around the circle. Once the swords start heading to us, we bait out the next ones, move slightly, etc. It can sometimes be unpredictable where the swords are going to go, but this time they move out of the way, play nice. And yeah, you can bait these out, but really we have triple melee, so they're kind of baiting themselves, right? AoE damage. Baiting the abilities, killing the mob, moving on. This one will tank at the base of the stairs so you can line of sight the throw. up a little more. There we go. And we'll just keep it here. I could have avoided that, but I soaked it. It's fine. Had plenty of defensives ready. Not a lot of damage going out besides that. Pretty straightforward boss. I do consider this one to be easier than the one that it defeated in the duel that can sometimes appear. But it seems like I see this boss less often. I'm not sure if there's any chance or it's set during each day which boss appears, but this time it's Harugia. So we'll kill this and immediately pull the patrol. Sometimes we'll wait for the patrol to come back depending on where it's at, because after we kill these mobs we're going to skip the next boss by running past it. However, since there are two arbalists in this, we have to make sure that it's far enough back to where they won't run into the boss. Because if that happens, there's a chance that it'll start the event and we won't be able to run past it. So as you can see, we're ring a piece and trying to knock the arbalist in, keep them as close as possible. One of them backs up, but not too far. That's fine. We'll make sure it doesn't go any further with stuns. But as I was saying earlier, we'll pick one of the arbalists and try and isolate it, cleave it down. Right here, I'm able to put the group in between the two so that we can hit them both. And then once the arbalists start to run, just stun them, keep them nice and contained, and finish the group. Now we line up at the last, I guess, indention in the vertebrae, do a short countdown, and then we take off. That skips the boss. If you're not able to skip it, and you need to kill it, that's fine. You'll just have to skip the pulls that we'll do later. Since we are able to skip it, it's able to save time on the timer, and we can make it up later in the Ghost Wing, which I will explain. So this is pretty straightforward. You definitely want to kill the banner as soon as possible. You don't want people to be slowed during his next, what am I going to do, between the 3 abilities phase right here. And then one tip, not just for tanks, but for anyone that does melee on the boss, being at max melee definitely helps run out faster to the edge on the ability where everyone needs to run out. And then it's good to save some cooldowns for the banner here to help, because since 2 people are dueling down there, it's good to have some big abilities so that 1 DPS in the tank can take that down without any stress for the next part, like I mentioned earlier. The banner slowing you makes this part much more difficult. So avoiding stuff. And rinse and repeat. This boss has a good amount of health, and obviously the 2 people dueling, depending on how long they take to duel, etc., they can really extend the fight. But those are the mechanics. So we pick this wing first because there is a skip in it, and then we'll pick the Abomination wing next because there's a skip in that wing. And depending on whether you're able to get those skips or not, in the Ghost wing, which is the final wing, you'll be able to pull extra mobs on each side of the big areas, depending on whether you were able to get the skips or not, and it actually works out to be the exact percent you need. As long as you get the 2 skips, it's just 2 extra small pulls of ghost adds, good to go. Alright, this boss is approaching defeat here, and then we'll move on to the next wing. some of these fights, they don't necessarily get more difficult. They remain the same level of difficulty, but it's just consistent. Gotta repeat the mechanics, maintain the phases, and get through it. Alright, so we'll head to the next wing. Immediately upon exiting this wing, you'll be able to go to the left or right. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to the light green banners, which is on the left. Now, controlling the sledge spewers is the main goal here, and so we'll prioritize getting stuns early on them, as you can see there, getting them placed, and then getting the other mobs set. But mainly we're trying to get the interrupt. We're trying to get reflex out. We're trying to keep these mobs as grouped as possible, and that's why I don't pull the whole room here. It's mainly to contain that one single mob. I can pull more now that that mob is dead, but the sledge spewers are the main thing that you want to keep still, and then just burst down, and it's really not an issue after that. All these mobs in this pool pretty much jump around, but again, the only dangerous one is the sledge spewer, making sure you get that interrupt and you're good to go to pull the next pool. But the next pool has 2 sledge spewers, so contain those as well. Only real dangerous thing is the cast. You can move out of the ground effects. The rest of the damage is survivable. You just want to make sure and get those interrupts and good stuns. So once we kill this butcher, we're looking to do the second skip, which is skipping the gas bag here. And really, it can save time to skip it, or if it's in a bad position in its patrol, you could pull it. It's not going to save you that much time, but it is good um, to skip it, because one, you can make up the percent elsewhere on much easier mobs, and two, because the mob can be unpredictable and sometimes be deadly, right? And since we already have to fight these unavoidably later, you might as well skip that one, save your cooldowns for the one that's coming up. So there's only one sledge spewer in this pool, but it is a little bit bigger than the others. We immediately get stuns out on it and focus that mob before we try and pull any of the others. That includes the gas bag coming up. That includes the mobs that will hop down whenever you reach a certain part out at the bottom of the ramp here. So I extend to where I think the mobs are going to come down, and I'm right at that point, but I don't reach it. And so I decide, hey, we'll just kill the gas bag, and then I'll pull the other mobs with the next pack. This is a poor decision. I should have just brought that pack down to kill with the gas bag, just based on how they work. Because once they come down, despite me being the one to proximity aggro or start the event that brings them down, they will immediately hop to somebody else, and it's very hard to group them after that. Plus, they're dealing damage to the group members. It's not a very good way to do this pull coming up, but that's what happens. Another way you could do this pull is obviously pull the smaller mobs with the gas bag, and then bring these 2 mobs at the end into the boss. That works perfectly fine. They don't do a whole lot besides you can interrupt the cast and then just survive the damage, keep them stacked perfectly well. But anyway, yeah, I combine these 2 pulls. We stay on the sledge. He gets a mid shield off. Oh well. And then we slowly kite backwards, and then we start the boss. The mobs are like completely stuck there. Yep, they get finished off just to residual damage, and then we begin core chop. Which I expected to take longer than it does. I believe we do pretty good on this boss compared to how long the last wings take, but let's see here. A lot of this boss is letting people get the leftovers on them and then immediately taking off. It's kind of pointless to try and go out and get the leftovers aggro whenever you can just stay central with core chop and they'll come in anyway. Um, we have a pretty tanky group with the two red paladins, so even having them just tank one of them isn't that big a deal. But doing and staying solid on the mechanics, always avoiding the hooks, and keeping the boss centralized is generally how I like to make the plays here. And as you can see, the boss is almost at half health already. Doing pretty good so far. Avoiding briefly stepping into the dot if I need to. It's not a big deal to have to walk through it, but keeping the boss out of it for the DPS is ideal, obviously. Each time one of the leftovers dies, that's where the ground effect comes from, and so you just have to watch out for that. Eventually the first ground effects that got put down here will go away, and then that area will clear up like that, and then we'll be able to move there without having to worry about the dot. And as you can see, this boss has Hateful Strikes, has a very clear wind-up attack pattern if you need to briefly turn away and look for the hooks. As long as you're watching that pattern, it's not an issue. This boss attacks very slow, although it can chunk tanks. You can rotate your cooldowns and stuff like that. I don't think this boss hits all that hard on a plus 12. As you can see, I haven't shield walled or felt like I even needed to. And, and the group seems to be stabilized just fine. Alright, since we were successful on the 2 skips, we know that we need to pull extra in the next wing. And that's why we saved this wing to last, because pulling extra mobs here is not only very easy, they're pretty weak, and don't take long to kill. So I'll go through this part not super fast. I'll make sure and at least get some aggro on each of the mobs. We're kind of strolling through here. But I do make sure and tag everything. That means I'm going to be heroic throwing these mobs over here, which don't generally... Well, I guess I just ran up and got them. They don't generally aggro if you just run past and get those first ones. So you got to make sure and hit those. Anyway, big AoE damage here. We'll pull the big guy as well, and then watch out for his initial AoE cast. We'll use some cooldowns to make sure that we're nice and healthy for that, because it does hurt the Soul Storm casting right here. And the general pattern we like to follow is left-left. I'm not sure it matters too significantly unless you're really trying to save a few seconds, right? But that is the route that we'll take. I'll come in immediately, just AoE, and then start trying to group them. Now these mobs, you can let the cast go, it doesn't hurt that bad. These are the same mobs that are at the start, but AoE interrupts, etc. are great. You just want to focus the Soulbinder here, make sure it doesn't cast as usual. Same with the one on this platform. Now you could pull extra on this platform, but we just do it on the next big platform. There's no real rhyme or reason there. I believe the mobs are worth the same amount. It's completely up to you guys. Purge the Magus shield, nuke him down, and then obviously Necrotic bolts are a priority, but the main priority is Bone Spear. You never ever want to let that go off because it hurts very bad. Soulstorm again, making sure we have everyone topped and healthy for that. So there's multiple ways to pull this. You can pull the sides into the middle if you're confident about it. I prefer just to try and stack the two mobs in the middle as tightly as possible and then kill them before getting the sides because there's a lot of casters on the sides and it can be a pain. However, as you can see, somebody accidentally aggroed this side and this kind of sets up for a mistake I'm about to make. But regardless, there's lots of casts going off. I'm trying to get mobs grouped. It's a little hectic, but as long as your group is contributing with helping the stops and whatnot and helping group them up, it's fine. You just make sure and don't get knocked off the edge, right? I'm weaving in reflex if I think we're not going to be able to get the stops in, but it seems like we're getting the cast pretty easily here. And so, since that pack aggroed unexpectedly, I forgot to pull the other side, which we need to. As I'm flying through the air here, we realize this and we have to immediately go right back. This does cost us some time, but it's not a big deal. Anyway, we'll kill these first and then head back to that platform, get one of those packs, and then head to the final boss. Obviously, you would save time by pulling both sides there to make up for the trash you skipped earlier, and that is that. And sometimes mistakes happen. It did cost a little bit of time, but it doesn't obviously cost us the run, as I've picked one where we can complete it. Um, but it is my mistake, right? And I have to own up to that. Sometimes you make mistakes as a tank, and still just gotta correct it and do your best, right? So we're back at this platform. We'll pull these as intended. It's much easier to keep them grouped if the tank is the first one to get in and get the threat established. And they go down much faster. We're much more concise with the damage as a result. That makes it very quick. And that's why I prefer to pull the sides separate unless you have really good silences to bring all the adds in. So immediately back over and on to the boss here. Hopping on to the boss. Alright, so this is a pretty lazy tank. I suppose you could do more as a tank to avoid the orbs, but for the most part you can just rely on your healer and stand still. It's really up to everyone else in the fight to do their job, and you just kind of sit here and tank. Obviously you can use defensives, rotate your cooldowns, etc. You could do a little shimming to get out of the balls faster. Like that one that just passed over me, I maybe could have strafed left a bit. Um, but really, just tanking it right here, everyone will group up, kill the ads. I'm not worried about our AoE at all. They'll absolutely crush that, no problem. And so I stay set, the boss stays set. It's pretty straightforward. I reflect when I can. And that's that. Definitely one of the more boring fights just because the orbs don't really do a whole lot to the tank. Especially with all the rolling hots and just defense reduction already going on you. One thing that is good though, whenever the groups up to kill the ads, you can make sure and focus interrupts on the boss so that the attention isn't split. They don't have to worry about maybe moving in if they're melee to get any interrupts there. So if you save your interrupt for whenever they are stacking, that can definitely help. Speaking of which, it looks like I didn't even do that there, but you know, should you do better than me? Anyway, getting more flex out here, plenty of interrupts going out. Pretty much damage while you avoid, stack briefly, damage while you avoid kind of boss, right? Final stack here as the boss is very low. I'll make sure I have my interrupt ready. It looks like I could have reflected that and didn't, but I just assumed the boss is going to die. It was at under 1%. So we have all of the side bosses done, and now we're on our way to the end. A lot of this run mechanically is very straightforward, and you don't have to really worry about percent as long as you're just trucking through the dungeon, but you cannot underestimate this last boss. One thing that I found that helps with this boss is the positioning, and so I'll try and explain here. You can see where the boss will spawn right in front of me, and then there's a blood stain right behind me. Exactly where I'm standing right here is a great spot to tank the boss to avoid the charges. I'm not really sure why. The charges don't really charge here that often, but it seems to work. And the real deadly combo here is charge into the beam. A lot of times people will get distracted looking where the charge is coming from, and they won't be ready for the beam impact that's immediately going to happen right after. So as long as you get familiar with that charge beam combo, your chances of living are much higher. And then another part of this boss are obviously the ads. One rule I like to follow is that as long as everyone can try and interrupt their ad, then it helps group them all immediately. And so, as you'll see here, I'll spin and interrupt my ad, or completely miss it. and then and then get back to the boss. Obviously, I kind of messed that up, but that's the flow I like to get into to help get the ads grouped up. And so we like to save lust until about 55 or so percent here, whenever it's going to transition phases, and we can really start bursting into it to make the second phase as short as possible. And then the last note here is obviously the Reaping Scythe, the Tank Buster. I'll try and save my self-heal for right after that lands to help the healer out. And then I'll make sure I'm rotating my defensives here, especially during the additional phases. Whenever there's ads and stuff like that, the Tank Buster still goes out. That's really when you want to be paying attention to it, and that's really when you want to be careful. Right there, the ads were out, and then there's a Reaping Scythe. Completely prepared for it. Did not give the healer any scare, right? That's important. So the faces changed, and as you can see, all the charges play nice. We're ready for the beam. And I'm trying to keep the boss as stable as possible right in that location. If I have to move it, I'll move it as little as possible, and then just keep it right there. They're doing a nice job AoEing, interrupting the ads. As you can see, the charges, they stay parallel for some reason. That's not always like that, but they, for the most part, do play nice here. We're moving back, we're moving out of it. Still trying to keep that boss near where it spawned and the blood puddle. And finishing the fight. So that is my commentary, and those are my tips on the +12 Theater of Pain. And I guess I'll see you in the next one.